I can still hear the whirring of the fan, as if it were the soundtrack to that moment. Each click felt like the clock of my life ticking wrong. I was sitting on the cold floor of my father's living room, my knees bent and my hands pressed against the tile. My heart was pounding so hard, it felt like it was about to rip out of my chest. But my face betrayed nothing. Growing up as a daughter in a Muslim family taught me to hide any emotion behind a practiced silence. On the outside, calm. On the inside, a scream no one heard. My name is Miriam, and I was 18 when everything around me fell apart. That night is etched in my mind. We were all gathered in the living room. My father, my mother, 2 uncles, my aunt, and him, Youssef. When he walked in, my legs buckled. I hadn't seen him in years, but my body remembered. He was different. Older, serious, with a thick beard that hid any trace of expression. But I knew who he was. I knew the invisible marks he'd left on me when I was still just a girl. I remembered the looks, the hidden touches, the times I'd run from him without anyone noticing. My father cleared his throat and shifted in his chair as if he were about to deliver some news. And he did. With the same naturalness of someone talking about dinner, he said, "You're going to marry Youssef. We're already sorting out the paperwork." Just like that. Simple. No talking, no choice, no warning. For a second, I thought I'd misunderstood, but the smiles around me confirmed it. My mother smiled with satisfaction. My aunt even murmured a thank God, as if it were a blessing fallen from heaven. Inside me, however, everything turned upside down. My voice came out weak, almost a thread of air. I don't want to marry him. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Everyone looked at me as if I'd said the most foolish thing in the world. My father narrowed his eyes and asked firmly, "Oh, what did you say?" "I don't want to," I repeated, almost breathless. My uncle leaned forward, his shadow almost crushing me. "Do you think you have a choice? Do you think this is democracy?" My mother's face flushed with shame, not for him, as if I were the disgrace of the entire family. And Youssef, he just smiled. That smile, the same smile I'd known since childhood, the same one that appeared every time he silently hurt me. It was at that moment that something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap, but like a string snapping after being stretched too long. I'd spent my whole life obeying, following every rule to the letter. But in that moment, a certainty dawned on me. I wasn't going to accept it anymore. I followed every rule, wore the right clothes, said my prayers at the right time, memorized verses from the Quran, fasted, obeyed, kept quiet, and in the end, it all seemed worthless. They wanted to hand over my body and my life to a man I feared. I couldn't even explain what was happening inside me. It was as if something was screaming, "You weren't born for this." It was as if a new voice was emerging within me, not of fear. My father didn't even need to yell. He just stood up, walked over to me, and slapped me across the face. Real. But what hurt most was seeing the disappointment in my mother's eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the fan whirring, wondering if God could hear my heart break. The next morning, everything seemed the same, but I knew nothing was the same anymore. My father didn't speak to me. My mother served coffee as if nothing had happened, and in the afternoon, Youssef he returned with his mother to talk about the wedding. I wasn't even in the room, but I heard everything behind the curtain. Every word was like an invisible knife. They talked about fabrics, colors, invitations, as if they were planning a party, while I felt like an object up for negotiation, a wrapped gift no one asked if I wanted to be given. It was in this place of pain, confusion, and silence that God began to call me, not with thunder, nor with lights, but with a whisper. Something inside me told me there was something beyond that prison, that I was not just a child of a culture, a tradition, a shame. I was a child of someone greater. This was the beginning of my escape, the beginning of my search, the beginning of my salvation. Later, my mother entered the room without knocking, arms crossed, face grim. "You're embarrassing us." My voice was low, almost a whisper. "I don't love him," she exploded. "Love? Who said anything about love? Do you think this is the West?" I stood up slowly, my body trembling, but the truth on the tip of my tongue. He touched me when I was a child. The slap came fast, hot. I lost my balance and hit the bed. I tasted blood in my mouth, She pointed at me with a trembling hand as if I were something impure. "Don't you dare lie about your cousin. Don't you dare. You have a month, either accept it or you'll be sent away and no one will want you back." She left without looking back. That night, I cried like I hadn't cried in years. I cried like a girl alone in a dark room. But this time, it wasn't just fear. It was anger. It was frustration. It was a pain that felt bigger than my body. I knelt and pressed my forehead against the cold floor, trying to pray. In the name of Allah, nothing. The words bounced off the ceiling and fell back down on me. I tried again, but everything sounded mechanical, lifeless. "Failing," I whispered. "Allah, do you see me?" Nothing. For the first time, I felt invisible, and that scared me more than any threat. In the days that followed, everything became more suffocating. Yusef began to appear more and more. He sat in the living room as if he already owned the house. He looked at me sideways, as if I were already his. One day he texted me, "How are you, honey? Don't worry, I'll take good care of you." I didn't respond. He sent a picture of a gold necklace with a caption that made me sick. "I'll give you this after our wedding night." I wanted to throw the phone away. The other day, we were in the kitchen. I was washing the dishes in silence, trying to disappear into myself. He came up behind me and whispered, "Too close. You'll learn to like me." The glass slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. I froze. He walked away smiling, as if he'd overcome something. I began to hide even more. I avoided the windows. I walked around the house like a ghost. I felt as if my every step was being watched, weighed, recorded. It was suffocating, so I began to hide within myself. My body was there, but my soul was sinking. At night, I made excuses to go to bed early, just to escape that reality. And it was on one of those nights, staring at the dark ceiling, that my soul cried out like never before. "If there is a real God, please help me. I'm drowning." There was no immediate response, no voice, no light. But suddenly, the air seemed to go still. Everything went silent, as if the world had leaned in to listen. I didn't know what it was, but I cried myself to sleep, feeling deep down that something inside me had changed. The next morning, nothing seemed different on the outside, but on the inside, it was like I was waiting for something. I didn't know what. I just knew there was more, that my story wasn't over yet, and there really wasn't. At that dinner, everyone ate in silence, until my father stared at me. "Samir wants to set the wedding date." My hand shook so much that the spoon fell onto the plate, making a noise too loud for that environment where everything needed to be controlled. My heart raced as if trying to escape my body. He looked at me steadily, his voice icy. "What did you say?" I took a deep breath and blurted out, "I'm not going to marry him." My father stood slowly, walked around the table, and stood beside me. I closed my eyes, waiting for the slap. But what came was worse. He leaned in and whispered, venom in his eyes, "You are no longer my daughter." And he left as if I didn't exist. I stood there paralyzed, unsure whether to cry, scream, or simply disappear. My mother didn't even look at me. She continued eating as if nothing had happened. In that moment, I realized I had become a stranger in my own home. That night, lying in the dark, I whispered again, "God, whoever you are, please help me." And something happened. It wasn't a miracle, nor a loud voice, but a spark inside me, a soft whisper that said, "You were born for something greater than this." It was at that moment that the war began. I was no longer just the obedient daughter. The girl who said yes to everything died that day. What shattered me wasn't my father's rejection, but my mother's silence, her empty gaze, her absence when I needed her most. Days turned into weeks. She walked around the house ignoring me, but to others she smiled, served tea, cut fruit for my brothers. To me, nothing. Not a look, not a word. I was alive, but it was as if I'd already died. The old me, quiet, obedient, was gone. What remained was something new, used, someone I didn't yet know who they were, but who no longer accepted that prison. And then Samir started showing up unannounced. At first, he pretended he was just coming to chat with my father. He talked about wedding venues, ceremonies, even visas, as if he already had plans to take me to another country. I'd stand back, listening to everything, each word tearing a piece of me apart. Soon after came the forced encounters. He would appear in the garden, in the kitchen, near the gate. One afternoon, I was watering my mother's jasmine. The sky was golden, and for a moment, I felt peace, until I turned and saw him standing at the gate, watching me. "You look beautiful in the sun," he said. I didn't answer. I dropped the watering can and ran inside. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely lock the door. That night, for the first time, I locked my room. 2 days later, my mother burst in without knocking. She slammed the door behind her and came at me. "What do you think you're doing?" "What?" I asked, confused. "You embarrassed him," he spat. "You turned your back on your cousin in front of the neighbors." "But I didn't even talk to him," I replied, astonished. "That's the problem," he shouted. "You're humiliating your family. People are talking." My voice came out weak but firm. "I don't want him, Mom. I already told you. I don't want to marry him." The slap I received was so hard I tasted blood in my mouth. My head snapped up from the impact, and my mother stood there breathing heavily, her eyes filled with rage and fear. "Honor comes before happiness," she said. "Do you think you're better than us? Do you think this world revolves around what you want?" Tears streamed down my face, and it was at that moment that I let out, for the first time, something that I had been keeping quiet for years. "I was just a child when you sent me to his house. You knew what he did to me," I whispered, my voice breaking. My mother didn't hit, but her gaze became so cold, so empty, that it seemed to erase me inside. "If you say that again," he said in a low yet iron-hard tone, "I will end your life myself." And he left, slamming the door as if sealing a sentence. That night, huddled in the corner of my room, my face throbbing, I realized that the physical pain was nothing compared to what I felt inside, and for the first time, I didn't cry. Not because I was strong, but because I was so broken I didn't even have the strength for tears. I stood there, staring at the wall, trying not to feel, trying to disappear. Honor comes before happiness. That phrase hammered in my mind like a condemnation, a prison made of pride and shame. A week later, my father called me into the living room. He was sitting on the edge of the sofa, threading rosary beads through his fingers. His face was a mask of disappointment, as if I had betrayed my faith, my family, and God all at once. "You have until the end of the month," he said without looking at me. "If you don't agree to marry Rashid, you're leaving this house." My throat went dry. "Leave? But go where?" "That's not my problem," he replied coldly. I looked at him, as if begging for mercy. "Abba, I am your daughter." He finally looked up, but what I saw there was worse than anger. It was contempt. No daughter of mine refuses her own blood. No daughter of mine speaks like an infidel. I turned my head to the door and saw my mother standing there, watching everything in silence. Always silent. "I'm not a slave," I murmured. My father didn't move. For a moment I thought he was going to hit me, but he didn't. He just shook his head and said bitterly, "The devil has entered your heart." After that, the atmosphere in the house changed. There was no need to say anything, because the looks, the weight in the air said it all. My brothers stopped talking to me. Rashid appeared more and more, with a confident air, as if he already owned me. One afternoon, I found a note pushed under the door. The handwriting was his. "You are already mine. Why fight what is written? Obedience brings peace. Rebellion brings shame." I tore it into little pieces and flushed it down the toilet. But inside, I didn't feel brave. I felt sick, exhausted. I began sleeping with the door locked, the scarf over my head, and my shoes beside the bed, as if I needed to escape at any moment. Sometimes I heard footsteps outside, low voices. One night, I heard my uncle whisper, "She's dangerous. If the others find out she refused, they'll want to do the same." I never wanted to be an example to anyone. I just wanted to be free. One sultry afternoon, returning from the market, a group of women surrounded me, all wrapped in black, only their eyes exposed. Among them was my aunt. She pulled me aside and said disdainfully, "You should be thankful because the Rashid still wants you. There are girls out there begging for a husband." Another woman added, "You dishonor your father. If he were a real man, he would have sent you away already." I kept walking without looking back, but each word was like a knife piercing my chest. By the time I got home, my heart was racing, my breath shallow, as if I'd run miles. I was at my limit. That night, I waited for everyone to fall asleep. I walked barefoot to the back room, my heart racing. There I found my brother's old laptop. The keyboard was broken, the screen flickered, but I managed to turn it on. I connected to the house's slow internet and opened the browser. I didn't know exactly what to search for. I just knew I couldn't keep living like this. The blue light from the screen illuminated my face as my hands trembled. Without thinking much, I typed, "How to escape a forced marriage in Islam?" The first results chilled me to the core. Horrific stories of girls who tried to run away and were punished by their own families. Some were beaten, some were killed, some simply disappeared. I scrolled through the page with a heavy heart until a headline stopped me. "Jesus appeared to me in a dream. Testimony of a former Muslim." I hesitated. My finger hovered over the button. I knew the weight of it. Apostasy, blasphemy, mortal sin. But I clicked. Suddenly, a woman's voice filled the silence of the warehouse. Her accent was different, but the pain was the same as mine. She spoke of a forced marriage to a cousin, of being silenced, of praying in secret. And then she said, "Jesus appeared to me in a dream, dressed in white, with open arms. He called me daughter." My eyes filled with tears. I turned down the volume, afraid someone would hear, but I couldn't stop watching. Every word broke through my defenses, shattered something old, and awakened something new. He said I wasn't anyone's property, that I was loved, that I was his daughter. I placed my hand on my chest. I'd never heard anyone speak of God like that, with love, with freedom. For the first time, the idea of a God who saw me and called me by name seemed possible. I wanted to know more, but I had no idea how. That night, my prayer was different. I said, "God, if you really exist, show who you are. I don't care about the name. I just want the truth. I just want to be free." And I remembered what the woman had said in the video, "If you seek with all your heart, he will answer." I closed my eyes and whispered into the darkness, "Jesus, if you are really the Son of God, please find me." At that moment, I didn't know it, but he was already coming to meet me. The following days didn't get any easier. The fear remained, the silence too. But inside me there was something new, a small flame, fragile, but alive. I began to obey only when necessary to avoid suspicion. I avoided Rashid, trying to become invisible, but inside, I searched. It was as if I'd tasted a little freedom, and now nothing could satisfy me. The nights became my escape. When everyone was asleep, I'd return to the storage room. The dim light of the lamp flickered, the thrum of the old laptop filling the space. I'd muffle the sound with a pillow and sit on the cold floor, the cloth of my tunic tucked under my legs. And I started typing, "Why do ex-Muslims follow Jesus? How can I know God personally? Is the Isa of the Quran the same Jesus of the Bible?" I read until my eyes burned. At first, I was cautious. Every link, every video was like stepping into forbidden territory. My finger was always ready to close the tab if someone showed up. I knew this wasn't just curiosity, it was dangerous. In my community, just asking questions like that could mark me as an apostate. This label was like carrying a death sentence, an unbearable weight, someone who needed to be corrected or even erased. But I couldn't stop. It was stronger than me. It was like thirst after days lost in the desert. I still didn't quite understand who Jesus was, but something inside me already desired him. And the strangest thing is that, as I searched, something in me changed. I, who had previously felt invisible, began to feel as if someone was truly watching me. Even before I understood, I could already feel it. He was near. Something had awakened within. Curiously, I wasn't afraid of Jesus. It wasn't the same fear I carried in Islam. There, I lived constantly on the brink of the abyss. If I missed a prayer, if my fast wasn't perfect, if a word slipped out, if my clothing wasn't right, punishment followed me. Hell seemed always lurking. The very thought of questioning those truths paralyzed me. But night after night, I listened to the testimonies of men and women from Egypt, Pakistan, Somalia, even Saudi Arabia. And they all, without exception, said the same thing. When I met Jesus, I felt peace for the first time in my life. Peace. That word haunted me because I had never, ever felt it. Not even once. One silent night, I heard the story of a young ex-Muslim woman, a little older than me. She said that, overcome by thoughts of death, she cried out alone in the darkness of her room. And then, in a dream, She saw Jesus surrounded by light calling her by name. She wept and said, "He knew me, he saw me." I covered my mouth with my hand to keep from sobbing out loud. That was the detail I didn't know I needed to hear. Being seen. I had never been seen. Not by my family, not by Rashid, not even by the God I'd been taught to fear, but this Jesus. He saw those people, those rejected, hidden, wounded women. And I asked myself, Jesus, do you see me too? Night after night, I returned to the old computer. With the dim light and the muffled hum of the fan, I delved deep and deeper. I discovered secret forums for ex-Muslims. I read stories so similar to my own, stories of pain, of escape, of hunger for God. Some had managed to escape. Others still lived surrounded by chaos, all persecuted. But there was something common in each story. They all spoke of a freedom I'd never known, of a joy that depended on nothing, of a different kind of love. Not the love I knew, full of threats, conditions, and control, but a love that was whole, present, without anyone needing to earn it. I began to jot down the verses they quoted. One of them resonated deeply with me. "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:28. Rest. Another word I didn't know I needed. I repeated this verse softly, lying down, with my forehead resting on the pillow. Come to me. Could it be possible? Was Jesus really calling me? The more I read, the more questions arose. Why isn't the Isa of the Quran the same as the Jesus of the Bible? Why doesn't the Quran mention the cross? And why, in Christian writings, did Jesus seem so tender, so strong, so alive, so different? My finger was always ready to close the tab if someone showed up. I knew this wasn't just curiosity, it was dangerous. In my community, just asking questions like that could mark me as an apostate. This label was like carrying a death sentence, an unbearable weight, someone who needed to be corrected or even erased, but I couldn't stop. It was stronger than me. It was like thirst after days lost in the desert. I still didn't quite understand who Jesus was, but something inside me already desired him. And the strangest thing is that, as I searched, something in me changed. I, who had previously felt invisible, began to feel as if someone was truly watching me. Even before I understood, I could already feel it. He was near. Something had awakened within me, and curiously, I wasn't afraid of Jesus. It wasn't the same fear I carried within Islam. There, I lived constantly on the brink of the abyss. If I missed a prayer, if my fast wasn't perfect, if a word slipped out, if my clothing wasn't right, punishment followed me. Hell seemed always lurking. The very thought of questioning those truths paralyzed me. But night after night, I listened to the testimonies of men and women from Egypt, Pakistan, Somalia, even Saudi Arabia. And they all, without exception, said the same thing. When I met Jesus, I felt peace for the first time in my life. Peace. That word haunted me because I had never, ever felt it. Not even once. One silent night, I heard the story of a young ex-Muslim woman, a little older than me. She said that, overcome by thoughts of death, she cried out alone in the darkness of her room, and then in a dream, she saw Jesus surrounded by light, calling her by name. She wept and said, "He knew me, he saw me." I covered my mouth with my hand to keep from sobbing out loud. That was the detail I didn't know I needed to hear. Being seen. I had never been seen. Not by my family, not by Rashid, not even by the God I'd been taught to fear. But this Jesus. He saw those people, those rejected, hidden, wounded women. And I asked myself, Jesus, do you see me too? Night after night, I returned to the old computer. With the dim light and the muffled hum of the fan, I delved deeper and deeper. I discovered secret forums for ex-Muslims. I read stories so similar to my own, stories of pain, of escape, of hunger for God. Some had managed to escape, others still lived surrounded by chaos, all persecuted. But there was something common in each story. They all spoke of a freedom I'd never known, of a joy that depended on nothing, of a different kind of love. Not the love I knew, full of threats, conditions, and control, but a love that was whole, present, without anyone needing to earn it. I began to jot down the verses they quoted. One of them resonated deeply with, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. Rest. Another word I didn't know I needed. I repeated this verse softly, lying down with my forehead resting on the pillow. Come to me. Could it be possible? Was Jesus really calling? The more I read, the more questions arose. Why isn't the Isa of the Quran the same as the Jesus of the Bible? Why doesn't the Quran mention the cross? And why, in Christian writings, did Jesus seem so tender, so strong, so alive, so different? My father's words echoed in my head, "You are a disgrace. You are no longer my daughter. To us, you are dead." It shattered me. But strangely enough, there was one image that wouldn't leave my mind, that video. The testimony of a man who had also lived in fear, who had also been rejected, in the midst of despair, dreamed of a man dressed in white who called him by name and told him he was loved. That man was Jesus. I didn't understand exactly what was happening inside me, but something had shifted. It was as if something was awakening deep inside. It wasn't from my mind, nor from fear, nor from obligation. It was from my heart. That night, alone in my dark room, I said the first sincere prayer of my life. It wasn't repeating memorized verses from childhood, nor reciting the words of the Hadith for fear of making mistakes. It was different. It came from a raw, broken place. I whispered, "God, whoever you are, I'm tired. I'm scared. I don't know who I am anymore. But if you're real, if you truly love me, please, show me. Show me who you are." And for the first time in a long time, I slept. But it wasn't just sleep. It was as if my body had collapsed and my soul had been taken to another place. The dream began with darkness, an absolute void, as if I were suspended in nothingness. Suddenly, a light so intense it hurt even my closed eyes. But strangely, it didn't blind me. On the contrary, it was as if I healed myself simply by existing. In the midst of that light, a figure appeared. A tall, firm man, but with an undaunting presence. He wore a white robe so pure, it seemed made of sunlight. His face, to this day, I can't describe it. It was as if all the love, all the justice, all the kindness I'd ever known were gathered in that gaze. And then he said my name, Nadia. My whole body froze. No one called me that anymore. It was the name my grandmother used when I was little, before she died. A forgotten name, but he said it again. Nadia. His voice was as firm as thunder, yet as soft as a lullaby. And then he said, "You are mine." At that moment, he extended his hand. I hesitated, but he spoke. "Don't be afraid." When his hand touched mine, something exploded inside me like fire. But it didn't burn. It was warm, but it didn't hurt. It was as if all the weight I'd been carrying, the fear, the guilt, the shame, was melting away, vanishing. And there, in that touch, for the first time in my life, I felt freedom. I woke up startled, gasping for breath, covered in sweat. My heart was pounding so loudly it seemed to echo throughout the house. I glanced at the clock. It was 3:07 in the morning. Everything was silent, but something inside me had changed forever. I had seen him. It wasn't just a dream. It wasn't imagination. It was real. It was a visit. It was Jesus. He knew me. I fell to the bedroom floor, trembling. My lips could barely form words. Who is the Lord? Isa of the Quran or Jesus of the Bible? Unsure of what to do, I grabbed my hidden phone, the one they hadn't yet discovered in the magazines. My hands trembled as I searched for a Bible app. I found one. I downloaded it. I waited, my heart racing. When it finally opened, the first thing that appeared on the screen was this verse. "Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine." Isaiah 43, verse 1. I put my hand to my mouth. It was exactly what he had told me in the dream, word for word. "You are mine." I cried softly, like a frightened child finally finding shelter. That night, leaning against the corner of my room, I opened the Bible for the first time. I read about Jesus, not as the distant prophet I'd been taught to fear, but as someone alive, close, present. I discovered how he touched rejected women, how he healed with compassion, how he looked at the woman caught in adultery and didn't but set her free. I read about the Samaritan woman, despised by everyone, and how he treated her as someone who mattered, as if her life was more than just the past. I've never seen a man treat women like that in any story. Never. And for the first time, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, God saw me too. Not as a disgrace, not as property, but as a daughter. The tears flowed without stopping until they soaked my veil. In the darkness, I whispered, Jesus, if it really is you, thank you. I want to know you. I want to be yours. Even trapped in that small room, even surrounded by rules and fear, something inside me was released, freed. In the days that followed, I seized every opportunity to read the Bible. I devoured the Gospels in secret, hiding my cell phone inside my mattress, only taking it out when the entire house was plunged into the silence of the early morning. I read until my eyes burned, as if each word were a sip of water in the desert of my soul. I memorized verses that became my refuge. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28. And also, perfect love casts out all fear. First letter of John 4:18. Each passage was like a breath of hope in the midst of darkness. But I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. My family was already eyeing me with suspicion. I knew that if they noticed any strange sparkle in my eyes, they would do everything they could to extinguish it. So, during the day, I smiled, lowered my head, and pretended to be the obedient daughter everyone expected. But at night, I met with Jesus in secret, and every night my prayer was the same. Jesus, protect me. Help me know you. Give me strength to carry on. I didn't know it, but the enemy was already watching. And soon, all hell would break loose against me. The Bible app had been hidden on my phone for a few days. I'd placed it in a folder called Utilities, with a fake icon, no flashy color, so as not to arouse suspicion. I never opened it during the day, only at night when even the wind seemed to sleep. Lying under the covers, I'd put on my headphones and press play. The soft voice reading the Gospel of John was like a lullaby. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. I didn't understand everything, but I understood enough to feel a hunger for truth growing within me. A hunger Islam had never satisfied. I was desperate for that light. But when we're really hungry, we forget to close the pantry door properly. That's how it happened. One morning, my younger brother, Judge, he came running into my room after the ball that had rolled under the bed. He was only 10 years old, too innocent, too quick for me to react. In the blink of an eye, he grabbed my phone and pressed the home button. He looked at me and asked, his eyes wide, "Why do you have that app with a cross on your phone?" My blood ran cold. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I jumped out of bed, stumbling on the sheets, trying to grab the phone from his hands. "Give me back my phone!" I shouted desperately. My brother stepped back, his face too serious for his age. "Is this the Bible? Are you reading the Bible?" he asked. I ran to the door, locked it, and clutched the phone to my chest as if it were my only shield. But it was too late. He ran down the hallway, screaming for our mother. A whirlwind of fear, anger, and despair suffocated me. I had seconds, maybe minutes, before everything changed forever. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was about to burst my ribs. I clutched my phone tightly in my hands and stared out the window. Could I escape? But where would I go? Outside, the sun was shining, but the streets felt cold and full of danger. Then I heard her voice. My mother's voice, sharp, hard as a blade. Before I could react, she was already in the room. What does this mean? Is it true? He whispered, his eyes blazing with fury. My father followed close behind, his belt already unbuckled, as if he didn't even need an explanation. My younger brother stood in the doorway, trembling. I no longer had the strength to deny it. There was no hiding it. I took a deep breath and said softly, "Yes." I was reading. I was listening. I didn't even finish my sentence. My mother's scream echoed through the house like I was a possessed demon. She lunged at me and slapped me so hard my head spun. I staggered, trying to catch my balance. "Damn you," she screamed. "You've brought shame upon this house. Do you want God's wrath to fall upon us?" "I just wanted to learn," I tried to explain. "Learn what?" my father roared. "Blasphemy! You want to become a Christian?" The belt came down on my back. Once. Twice. I fell to the ground, screaming, not just from the pain, but from the shock of seeing the man who once taught me to ride a bike now punishing me like I was trash. My mother snatched the phone from my hands and threw it on the floor. The screen cracked instantly. She picked it up again and threw it against the wall until it shattered. "You think you can fool us by hiding this?" he spat. "We're watching, and you'll regret it." They dragged me back to the room and locked the door from the outside. No cell phone. No one. Only the light coming through the crack in the window. Lying on the mattress, my back burning and my soul shattered, I heard the voices outside. My father said, "She's been bewitched. We need to take her to the mullah." My uncle replied, "No. If they find out, we will be humiliated." "So what do we do?" my mother asked. The silence weighed heavily, until the sentence that broke my heart completely came. "You'll stay locked up until you forget these lies." What if I didn't forget? The question hung in the air. The silence that followed was colder than any punishment, until my mother's soft, cruel voice sealed the fate. "So, she is no longer our daughter." My pillow was soaked with tears. I screamed inside with what little strength I had left, but no sound came out. I could only murmur silently, "Jesus, if you are real, help me. I'm scared." There was no vision, no voice. But something different happened. A strange peace, one I can't explain, washed over me. Even locked away, hurt, and rejected, I knew I wasn't alone. And I remembered the verse I had read on the app before it all happened. "I will never leave you, nor forsake you. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you." Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5. I didn't even know what Hebrews was, but those words were etched on my soul like an eternal seal. I repeated them over and over, like someone clinging to the last thread of hope. "I will never leave you." I had no idea what would come next, but something had already shifted inside me. I no longer had the same fear I had before, because now I knew who I belonged to, and no one could rob me of that. 6 weeks had passed since they locked me in that room, 6 long weeks of isolation, of prayers shouted outside the door, and Quran recitations echoing from speakers near the window. 6 weeks of starvation, not just of the body, but of the soul. My family pretended I didn't exist, or said I was possessed by something impure. But they forgot one important detail. When a seed is buried, it doesn't die. It grows. And there, in the midst of the darkness, God was silently watering me. One stormy night, as the generator's noise shook the house, I heard a soft tapping on my window. I thought I was dreaming, but the tapping was repeated. I peeked through the crack and could hardly believe it. It was Sarah. Sarah was the only person I truly trusted. A quiet Christian college classmate who always studied near me in the library. She spoke slowly, as if each word carried weight. Once, I saw her reading a small black book, the Bible, and it was there that we discreetly exchanged numbers. When my faith began to waver, she was the one I texted, asking for verses. But since my phone was confiscated, I haven't heard from her since. Now here she was, risking everything, sliding a folded note across the window. My hands shook as I picked it up and read it in the dim moonlight. "If you still want to, there is a way." Sunday, at 3 in the afternoon, my heart raced. Sunday felt like a sentence marked on the calendar. I hadn't been able to leave the house for weeks. But that morning, as if ironically, my father ordered me to accompany him to the baptism of a distant cousin. It was a test. He wanted to show the family that I was normal, that my fear had healed me. He didn't know that he was unintentionally leading me straight to the miracle that would change my life. I put on my black abaya, my hijab tightly tied, but underneath I wore a white t-shirt, as if it were a secret prepared. I didn't fully understand what baptism was. I'd only read a few excerpts, but in my heart, I knew. I wanted to be washed. I wanted to belong to Jesus. After my cousin's ceremony, I asked to go to the bathroom, but instead, I went out the side, hailed a taxi, and asked the driver, "Take me to 12th Street to the church." When I arrived, I saw a simple building with peeling walls and a tin roof. But for me, at that moment, it was the most beautiful place I had ever seen. As I entered, I felt a gentle breeze embrace me. I thought I would feel embarrassed or afraid, but all I felt was a love so deep my legs nearly gave out. It was then that Sarah appeared through the back door. She didn't say anything, just hugged me tightly, holding my still shaking hands. Inside, the pastor was waiting for me, an elderly man with eyes so kind they seemed to pierce my soul. He didn't say much. He just smiled and said calmly, God has waited for this moment longer than you can imagine. In the small room, there were only 7 people. No lights, no loud music, just a simple water tank and voices murmuring prayers. Then the pastor asked me quietly, "Do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God?" I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "Do you believe that he died for your sins and rose again?" "Yes, I believe so," I replied, already sobbing. "Do you wish to follow him, whatever the cost?" For a moment, the world stopped. I thought about my parents, my siblings, about my entire life that could change from that moment on, but I remembered the voice I heard in that vision. "You are mine." Those words were still echoing inside me when my racing heart whispered, "Whatever it takes, his." The pastor raised his hand and said firmly, "In the name of the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit, I baptize." When I was plunged into the water, time seemed to stand still. The water touched my head, and in that instant, it wasn't just my body that felt it. Something deep inside me broke. It was as if the weight of fear, shame, and old wounds were being lifted away. When I emerged from the water, my body was trembling. I was soaked, tears streaming silently down my face. I felt clean, pure. No Islamic ceremony had ever given me that feeling. It wasn't just water, it was life. My friend Sarah wrapped me in a towel and whispered in my ear, "Now you are my sister forever." I didn't want to leave, but I knew I had to go back. We prayed together, hugged tightly, and I left in silence, the same way I'd arrived. I didn't think anyone had noticed my absence. But when I got home, my father was at the gate. His face was heavy, his gaze somber. "Where have you been?" he asked harshly. I swallowed hard and responded with the lie I prepared on the way. "I got lost in the market." He didn't believe me. He grabbed my arm tightly, dragged me inside, and locked me in the room. The door slammed shut behind me. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I sat on the floor, still wet, but with a smile on my face. They could arrest me, they could watch me, but they could never erase what had happened. I had died with Christ there, and now I lived in him. Almost 3 weeks passed from my secret baptism to the day everything fell apart. Until then, I thought I'd managed to hide my steps. I washed my clothes in silence, deleted all of Sarah's messages, and spoke as little as possible. Prayers were said quietly, out of earshot. But in a house like mine, sin has eyes hidden. In that place, abandoning Islam wasn't just disobedience. It was treason. It was war. It was considered a crime worthy of death. I'm not sure how it happened. Maybe someone followed me. Maybe I slipped up on something. Or maybe my dad noticed something different in my eyes and couldn't ignore it. What I do know is that I woke up one morning to screams echoing through the house. "Kafir, apostate, liar!" The door to my room flew open. My father walked in, his hands shaking, but his voice as steady as ever. Behind him, 2 uncles followed. He was holding a piece of paper. When I saw it, my heart sank. It was a photo of me, soaking wet, in a white t-shirt, in the baptismal tank. Someone had photographed me. Someone had sent it to him. It was proof of what they called betrayal. My mother cried in the hallway, while my younger brother looked pale, unsure whether to run or scream. My father's gaze changed. It wasn't just anger, it was cold, calculated hatred. He looked me in the eye and asked, "Were you baptized?" My mouth trembled. My soul wanted to flee, but something inside me, the same spirit that sustained me in the dream, that enveloped me in the waters of baptism, gave me courage. I didn't deny it. I didn't whisper. I answered out loud, "Yes, I was baptized." The silence that followed weighed like a sentence. Then chaos began. My uncle was the first to react, with a slap so hard my vision blurred. My father grabbed his leather belt and began to whip me. My mother didn't try to stop me. No one did anything. Each blow burned my skin like fire. They dragged me out of the room and threw me onto the patio floor. My shirt and hijab ripped. The hot concrete burned my bruised skin. Neighbors began to gather. Some watched in horror, others in silence, and some shouted cruel words. "Kill this infidel! Stone the apostate!" I heard my little sister crying behind the window curtain. It was then that I heard the coldest words ever spoken by my father. "Let us purify this house with her blood." The same man who rocked me as a baby, who told me stories under the stars, now condemned me. He said that if I didn't recite the Shahada and deny my faith in Jesus immediately, he would hand me over to the religious police. and I knew the fate reserved for apostates. I had a choice: bow or die, recite or be destroyed. Lying on the ground, bloodied, time seemed to slow down. The sun burned the concrete beneath my wounded body. My arms trembled with pain, but through it all, I heard a voice inside me, soft and "Do not deny me before men, and I will not deny you before my Father in heaven." I closed my eyes and whispered with the little strength I had, "I won't deny it." Suddenly, I felt something hard hit my side, a rock. Then another hit my shoulder. They were going to stone. I thought that would be the end of me. But it was at that moment that Sarah appeared. To this day, I don't know how she knew, or how she got there at that time. I only remember her voice piercing the noise of the crowd. "She's a minor! You can't do this! You'll kill her!" Sarah ran to me and threw herself over me, covering me like a shield. The crowd froze for a moment. Some began to shout at her, others backed away, afraid to get involved. Someone called the police. Maybe it was a neighbor. Maybe the church itself. I don't know. All I know is that within minutes, a simple van pulled up in front of the house. From inside, 2 police officers and a Christian lawyer emerged. They quickly pulled me into the back seat. Sarah climbed in with her, panting, and the door closed. And so, without looking back, I disappeared into the streets. I was taken to a simple Christian shelter on the outskirts of the city. The place had only 2 rooms, shared by 5 young ex-Muslims like me. Each carried their own scars, their own stories. But in that small space, there was something my home never had: peace. That night, lying on a thin mattress, my body ached. I cried softly, but they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of relief. I had lost everything: family, home, even my name. But I had found Christ. And somehow that was enough. I thought the worst was over. That there, in that shelter, the storm would end. But I was wrong. What came next nearly destroyed me. The news spread like wildfire. A young Muslim woman, the daughter of a respected family, had abandoned Islam and been baptized. In the eyes of society, I had committed the worst of crimes. The shame wasn't just mine, it was political, it was religious, it was public. A week after I arrived, the shelter coordinator walked into the room, her eyes full of panic. "Your father filed a lawsuit against you." I asked what the accusation was. She took a deep breath and replied, "Apostasy, blasphemy, and promotion of false religion." My father claimed that I had been recruited by a foreign Christian network whose aim was to destabilize Islam in Nigeria. My stomach churned. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. Now it was a matter of national security. She showed me a news report. My name wasn't in it, but the story was clear. And outside, the people were crying out for justice. Justice for them meant blood. That night, I couldn't sleep. The windows were covered, but I felt like guns were pointed inside. Every noise made my body shiver. I was no longer hidden. I was being hunted. 2 days later, I was summoned to appear before a Sharia court. I was still a minor and had already applied for asylum, but they still insisted they had authority over me because I was born Muslim. The church lawyer shook my hand. Beside him was an elderly gentleman named Senior, Daoud, who seemed to carry in his gaze an unshakable faith. He leaned towards me and said softly, "Do not be afraid. Even if they threaten you, you are not alone. Christ is with you in this furnace." When I entered the room, my heart raced. To my left sat the imam of the local mosque. To my right, sitting, was my father, impassive, his eyes as cold as ice. My mother was gone. Neither were my brothers. Only him. Behind me, the murmur of the audience filled the space. Journalists, neighbors from the community, curious onlookers who just wanted to see my end. Then the judge spoke, in a voice that seemed to crush all hope. "Renounce your conversion. You are still young. You have been deceived. Recite the Shahada and you will be forgiven." My legs trembled. The crowd surged forward with hungry eyes, waiting for my defeat. My father watched me intently, as if every second were a judgment. But there was something greater sustaining me. I looked at the judge, and in a soft but firm voice, I replied, "I was not deceived. I knew Jesus. He saved me from death, and I cannot deny him. He is my Lord." A collective gasp filled the room. The imam stood up, furious, shouting, "She's mocking our faith. She should be hanged in the public square. She's dangerous." The judge called for silence, but my father also stood up. His voice wasn't one of uncontrolled fury. It was calm, cold. sharp as if she were still my daughter, I would take care of it myself. But for me, she's already dead. Let the law do what it takes. My throat burned, my eyes filled with tears, but I didn't cry. The session adjourned for deliberation. While we waited in a side room, the lawyer senior Daoudi approached me and spoke in a low voice. There's a chance they'll just order your rehabilitation, but if they consider it treason, he didn't finish the sentence. That night, I was placed in protective custody. I couldn't leave the shelter. Guards stood watch outside. My connections were monitored. Not even the Sarah was able to visit me. It was then that we received the news that froze my heart. A fatwa had been issued against me, a public death warrant. My photo was circulating in WhatsApp and Telegram groups, accompanied by a reward of 50,000 naira for whoever could purify the land of my presence. That same night, the shelter received a bomb threat. We had to be evacuated in a hurry in the middle of the night. After hours of silence, I was taken to a missionary clinic in the countryside. There was no cell phone or internet, only prayer, medicine, and the sound of the wind through the trees. When I arrived, my body finally gave out. All the trauma, the beatings, the screams, it all came crashing down on me at once. The fever consumed me. My wounds became infected. I lost weight rapidly and could barely eat. But even in that place of pain and weakness, I had never felt Christ so close. Lying there, trembling, I imagined him sitting beside my bed. When the nightmares returned, I clung to the promise that echoed with, I will never leave or forsake you. One day when I managed to open the Bible again, I found a verse that seemed written just for me. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Matthew chapter 5, verse 10. The road to the final verdict was long and fraught with anxiety. The church worked silently, pleading for international support. Some Christians mobilized, and even a Western embassy pressured the local government. Ultimately, the charges were dropped due to lack of jurisdiction, but the freedom I received came at a high price. I could never return home. I could never use my real name in public again. I was told clearly, if they found me again, they would finish what they started. I was only 19 years old and had already faced death head-on. But at the same time, I discovered a freedom that no prison could take away. Because no matter how much they imprison the body, no one can silence what Christ has done within me. I'll never forget the first time I entered an underground church. It was in the back of a bakery. The smell of bread and cinnamon still hung in the air. Behind sacks of flour was a small iron door that creaked as it opened. Through it, a narrow staircase led down to a simple basement. In that hidden place, I found the body of Christ. There were no plush pews, no microphones. Just 15 people seated on crates and old chairs, with an open Bible in the center. A few candles illuminated the space, casting soft shadows across the walls. A 60-year-old woman led the worship service in whispers, tears streaming down her face. A boy read John chapter 15 with a trembling voice. If the world hates you, remember that it hated me first. And then we prayed together. They weren't those memorized Arabic prayers, but real cries, groans, sincere weeping. Everyone there knew what it was like to suffer. Everyone had lost something. But there was one thing no one could take away: Jesus. I knew the journey wouldn't be easy. Even in that faith community, I was still startled by loud noises. I still had trouble sleeping. Rashid's name echoed in my dreams, and my father's fists returned in my nightmares. I woke up sweating, panting, as if still trapped in the past. But little by little, the Spirit began to heal me. Not by erasing my memories, but by transforming my wounds into redemption. The shelter leaders introduced me to a trauma counselor, a Christian woman from Lebanon named Miriam, who had also fled violence for honor. We met once a week, and she, with rare patience, began to guide me through the valley of pain I carried. She taught me that crying wasn't weakness, but a path to healing. She showed me that Jesus also cried, that he knew human pain firsthand, and would never be ashamed of my fragility. On a rainy afternoon, I managed to put into words the question that had been suffocating me since the night I ran away. Will I ever be able to see my family again? I asked almost in a whisper. Miriam looked into my eyes with a deep calm and tenderness that seemed to pierce my soul. Maybe so, but even if not, now you belong to a family that will never abandon you. In that moment, something inside me broke. I stopped begging God to take away the pain I felt and started asking Him to create something beautiful from my ashes. The weeks passed, and I began memorizing verses, no longer to repeat by heart, but to nourish my weary heart. Romans chapter 8 became my refuge. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Tribulation, persecution, famine, nothing can do it. These words became my armor, which I whispered every morning to protect my soul. My decision to be baptized definitively came on a cold, rainy night. It was in a hidden basement, inside a metal tub, surrounded by 3 women holding candles. I entered the water shivering, but when I emerged, I felt a peace I can't describe. It was as if something old had been left behind, and something new had been born within me. The crucifix I wear around my neck today is not a symbol of rebellion against those who hurt me. It is a constant reminder that I am no longer a victim. I am a rescued, redeemed daughter, and I have a crown waiting for me in heaven. My life now unfolds in the shadows, not out of fear as before, but because some lights are too precious to be exposed carelessly. Telling my story isn't easy. Every word carries a risk, a chance of being discovered, but when I try to remain silent, I feel the Spirit remind this message needs to be heard, and so I speak. I speak in encrypted conversations, in videos with blurred faces, in notes discreetly left in the corners of women's shelters, always signed with the same words: He sees you, He loves you, you are not alone. I'm not famous, I don't have any followers, I may never return to my country, I may never hug my mother again or see my brother grow up, but I found something death cannot steal: the truth, and that truth set me free. There are days when longing weighs like a stone. I imagine my mother lighting candles, praying 5 times a day, and perhaps whispering my name through her tears. I wonder if Rashid has remarried, if my father passes by my old room and hesitates a second longer than he should. But that shame that I carried for so long, I left it at the foot of the cross. Today, I still dream, but the dreams are different. Last week, I dreamed again about the man in white. He was walking beside me, hand in hand, down a narrow road in the middle of the desert. I asked softly, "Am I still alone?" He smiled and replied, "I've never been away from you. Today, I walk in silence, in obedience, side by side with Jesus. My name has changed, but my soul has been born again. Now I live among brothers and sisters of faith, serve in ministries that must remain hidden, and accompany young women who walk similar paths to mine. We embrace, cry together, and even in the darkness, we bear witness to the light that found us." One of them is a trick. A 17-year-old girl full of doubts, fear, and confusion. But I see the sparkle in her eyes, the way she holds tightly to the small Arabic Bible I placed in her hands. "Is it worth it?" she asked me one night, almost voiceless. I shook his hand, looked deep into his eyes, and answered without hesitation, "Yes, it's worth 1,000 times. Jesus is worthy of every struggle, every tear, every pain. I almost lost my life for refusing to marry my cousin, but in Christ I found true life, eternal life. I may be hidden from the world, but I know I am seen in heaven, and that is enough for me. This testimony is not just mine. It is for every sister who still lives imprisoned by fear, silenced by violence, and crushed by judgment. I want you to know you are not forgotten. You are not impure or cursed. You are seen. You are loved. You are free.